Hi, my name is Sage Turk, and 2 years ago, something big happened that would change my life forever. Despite being an active Mormon, Christian, and believer for over 33 years, I lost my faith in God. What I didn't lose was my happiness, my hope, and the curiosity to explore every facet of this crazy adventure called life. And like every adventure, sometimes we can use a little guide. Episode 1, Year, starring me, Sage, and our special guest host, Tom Perry.
Infants on Thrones presents The New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole.
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. I am your host, Sage Turk, and with me is my special guest host for the episode, Mr. Tom Perry.
Hey, Sage. Thanks for bringing me on to your inaugural episode. This is exciting, dude.
Yeah. So most of you listeners, you will recognize Tom, of course, from the Infants on Thrones podcast, where he is a frequent guest, I believe.
Yeah, I
co-contributor.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Tom, how long have you been podcasting for?
Holy crap. I'm gonna say, let's see, probably 6-7 years, something like that, maybe 8, somewhere in there.
Yeah, man, that's a long time. That's like from the very beginning of the whole concept of podcasting, is it not?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I haven't been podcasting like full on regularly. Like I'm not one of those guys that puts out something every single week. So that's probably why I've been able to maintain and stay in as long as I have. So
yeah, I guess so. But I don't know, 8 years cumulatively, that's got to be like, at least even infrequently, that's like a solid, 5 years of just nonstop talking to people.
Yeah, that's true. I should totally get like a podcasting merit badge or something. It's bull. I totally should get something like that.
So are you ever afraid that you'll run out of things to say?
Every single time I talk, yes. It's like, yes, I'm always afraid that I've either said something too often. In fact, when I meet up with people socially and they, kind of know my background of podcasting, I start talking. They're like, "Yeah, I already know that. No, I've actually already heard you talk about this and this story. Yeah, at least on 2 podcasts, right, Tom?" I was like, "Oh, you're a listener. Sorry about that."
But I mean, if they've heard it before, at least they haven't heard it punctuated by the patented Tom Sigh, right? So
right.
you've got the trademark. I still need to figure one of those out. I'm thinking of like a funny sign off or something, like "Toodaloo, bitches" or something. I don't know. We'll see what happens at the end of this episode.
Toodaloo, bitches. That gets my vote.
Pretty good. Yeah. So I guess before we dive in, first, because this is episode 1. I don't want to get too far into what the podcast is. It's pretty self-explanatory, but this is sort of a recurring mini-series, if you will. This is season 1 of a concept that I've had in the back of my mind for a long time, but the more and more that I hear people sort of leaving the church and moving to, what one might consider sort of the next phase, I see this real sort of confusion and hesitancy towards moving, or at least labeling yourself in the camp of atheism or disbelief in God. And there's a lot of, sort of pent up preconceived notions around that. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And, my attempt over these next 10 episodes is going to be seeing if we can pick it apart piece at a time, and if we can't make something that's more positive out of this thing, something that we can all sort of get behind, and if nothing else, just not be such assholes all the time about it, right?
Exactly. Let's try to not be such big dicks or assholes. Right.
That's right. That's right. So today's episode is about fear. Tom. And so you just mentioned, you being afraid of not having anything to say or running out of stuff to say. We're going to do a little game, right?
All right, sounds good. Let's do this.
So this is the fear game. So I'm going to run through a series of things, common fears people have, and I want you to rate it. It's going to be either Scooby Don't, which means not scary.
Okay.
Or it's going to be super spooky, which is very scary to you personally. Are you ready?
Oh, that's the scale?
That's from Scooby Don't to super spooky. That's right.
Super spooky Scooby Don't. All right, I'll try.
That's like the scientific units of measurement of scariness.
Let me put on my white lab coat. All
Okay.
right, let's do this.
All right, we're prepared. All right, first up, the classic spiders.
Not really. So I'm going to go more on the Scooby Don't.
Scooby Don't. Okay. For me, super spooky. I am totally arachnophobe. I
Really?
will. Oh yeah. I'll jump out a plate glass window before I'll let a spider touch me. So, definitely super spooky. Okay. What about snakes?
Same. Scooby Don't.
Scooby Don't. Oh man. Okay. Same with me. Scooby Don't. I think snakes are cool. Rats.
Same. Yeah.
Scooby Don't. Okay. So no creepy crawlies. What about oh, this should be obvious. Public speaking.
Yeah, I'm going to go very scary.
No, for reals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though this is ostensibly the most public of all speaking to millions of patient listeners.
Yeah. I mean, even when I was in the church and I became on the high council and I had to speak all the time, each and every time was like panic inducing. I was freaking out. And
Okay.
I thought it'd get better, and it does a little bit, but not a whole lot. I still get super nervous.
So the thought of public speaking. All right. Well, for me, I'm going to put a Scooby Don't. I actually don't have a problem with public speaking.
Look at you, man.
Yeah.
Show off.
What about dark alleys?
Nah, Scooby Don't.
Scooby Don't, not as scared. You wouldn't think twice about just walking into a dark alley in a weird city.
I would probably look a little suspiciously, like, then I just go.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, cool. I don't know. I put that in the middle, so that would be like Scooby Spooky. That's the middle one.
Scooby average.
I want to be cool, and I think if I was with other people, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not scared. But if I was by myself, 100%.
No, I got this, guys. Don't worry about it. I got this.
But then again, over here, it's a little nicer looking, and they're better restaurants. So
Why don't you go ahead of me? Yeah, just do it. It
I'm
looks
right
clear.
behind you. All right. What about the germs that cover every square inch of your hands as we speak?
Ooh. I'm not too big of a germaphobe, but the more I know about it, then I become more like you just mentioning it. Now I'm like holding my hands away from my face. So I guess that fluctuates. I'm just gonna say, yeah, more of a somewhat scary.
All right. We'll call that a Velma.
Yeah, I'll call that a Velma. Yeah.
Not quite one or the other. All right. Good. For me, Scooby Don't. I'm not a germaphobe. Terrorists.
Seeing that I've never been directly affected by them, I'm going to say Scooby Don't.
Okay, so live your whole life not really thinking about terrorists all that much. Okay, yeah. Same with me, Scooby Don't. I'm not particularly scared of terrorists as a concept. All right, here's one. Those weird hairless cats.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Let's go. Let's go right in the middle. I mean, the one that's in Austin Powers is kind of cute, I guess. But
here's the question: Have you ever actually pet one of those things?
No, I've only seen them like on video or whatever. I've actually never seen them in real life. So I guess in a way they're not real.
all I can say, and I had the misfortune of petting one, is that it is nature's most perfect replica of human ballsack skin. It's just the exact softness and suppleness. It's really disconcerting.
Coming from someone who's done a lot of study.
I have a lot of personal experience with this. Yeah. Shaved ball hair skin, by the way.
Same texture and everything.
Okay, here we go. This is the last one. The eventual and unavoidable heat death of the entire universe.
Okay, that's very spooky to me. Yeah.
Super spooky.
Yeah, super spooky.
Yeah, okay, super spooky. Same with me. I'm gonna go with super spooky. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the eventual and unavoidable heat death of the entire universe, but first, I'm curious as a kid, when you were at your most sort of scaredy cattish, scared of things, what was your go-to fear? What was the thing you're most afraid of?
Ooh, well, when I was thinking about it, there are probably two things, and I don't know which one actually took the lead over the other, but I think heights. You
Okay.
know, old fashioned being scared of heights was one of them. The other one was a form of public humiliation or being bullied.
Did
That
you
was
have?
probably.
Now you say a form. Was there a particular form? I mean, was it the wedgie? Was it the tipped upside down and your pockets shaking out? I mean,
Yeah, like any of those. Like I have this like traumatic memory of doing drama in elementary school,
uh-huh.
and they put me in a pair of pantyhose, and
I understand.
I'm gonna relive this traumatic experience.
We're doing this, Tom. I've got your
Yeah.
hand
So
virtually.
thanks, man. I'm gonna need your hand. So I put it on, and then I had something on my upper torso or whatever, but it didn't matter. And as soon as I came out, there was a lot of homophobic remarks that came out, and I ended up running off stage. The classic, like I
Oh
can't handle
no.
this. I ran off stage, and then I just took it off, got my jeans, and I ran right home, right during school and everything. I'm not proud of this. I didn't say I was proud of it, but
Oh man.
then I went home and I didn't want to ever go back to school. I was crying to my mom, "Why do we have to go back? Why do we have to go back?" And then I ended up going back, and I mean, some of my fears were warranted. Like there was a couple kids like, "Look at Tom, he's freaking gay. He's wearing pantyhose." Um, but
So
time usually healed that.
so was that the thing that then caused that perpetual fear of public humiliation, or did you already have it and that was just a
That's
manifestation of your fear?
it's a great question. You're a perfect therapist. I think it could have been either a catalyst or it could have been the beginning because I don't have any memories prior to that.
Yeah.
So it might have been something to that effect. But when I get afraid of speaking publicly, I don't have those flashbacks like, oh shit, I'm wearing pantyhose. I
But the
don't
question
have.
is, do you ever in your mind go to that place of like, I should just run. I could just run right now home and never come back.
No.
Okay.
Maybe when I was younger, like if I had to do a form of like, reading an essay in front of the class sort of thing. I don't have any direct memories of that, but
I just love picturing like standing up to like do a talk in the middle, just being like, nope, fuck this, pull the ripcord and just vaulting over the pew and just heading out the door,
I
just
know, I know, I
never to be
know.
seen again.
There has been there was a time when I was speaking as a high councilman where I got up there and I ran dry. Like I ran through my outline or my
Oh no.
script and I look and there's at least 10, 12, 15 minutes left. And
Oh
I was
yeah.
like, okay. And I guess we'll end early.
Yeah, the dreaded 15 minutes where you know your testimony is not going to cover that gap. So,
And then the bishop gets up and he does his, ashamed look at like, well, I didn't have anything planned. But I guess Brother Perry's left me some extra time to go ahead and counsel or threaten you guys with obedience or whatever. So, yeah.
oh, well, that's perfect. That surprisingly is going to segue into the rest of our episode. For me, in my childhood, fear, it's so weird. Like I was more afraid of aliens, like the round-headed, almond-eyed aliens, than anything else on the
Really?
planet. Oh, I was terrified of these suckers, and I'm pretty sure it all came from there was this like miniseries that came on when we were kids, and it was called Intruders.
I don't think I've seen it, but
Man, it was one of the first sort of things where they started diving into like people that were have like lost time and nosebleeds, and then they get these little flashbacks that are super quick of being on the slab and these aliens
right.
looking over at you. And the thing that was freakiest to me was there was this part that basically the wife who's been constantly abducted throughout her life, she's trying to wake her husband and he just like won't move. It's like in the middle of the night, and there's like a light coming in through her window, and her husband's just like paralyzed. He won't even wake up, and she looks over, and at the end of her freaking bed, man, it's one of those little things just there.
Oh
And I
man.
probably spent a solid 2 years like just not sleeping, and this is probably
How
I'm like
how old were you? Yeah.
I was probably like 9 years old or something. So between the ages of 9 and 11, no sleep. I got lots of crafts done.
I remember. Do you remember you probably remember this movie is like Fire in the Sky, and it
Oh
was
yeah,
supposed
fire!
to
Oh, Fire in the Sky was awful. Yeah, so
And the reason
scary.
why that movie messed with me is because I think at the bottom of the poster it was like based on a true event or based on
Yeah,
true story. And I was like, what? And so when I watched it, you have that playing in your head like this shit happened, dude. It
yeah,
happened. It's for
yeah.
real. And wasn't it the same kind of green, big-eyed aliens, and then they do the probe and everything, right?
Oh yes, exact same kind of aliens. Oh man, I think that
Yeah.
was actually based off of a dude from Utah. I think Fire in the Sky was.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so right in the epicenter. So talk about facing our fears, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm doing this. I'm moving to Utah. I'm facing every fear all at once. Public speaking, aliens, being called gay.
Yeah,
It's just
right.
all of them, just all at once coming at you. Uh, cool, man. Well, that's so. So one of the reasons, okay, bringing up general fears is I think in general I would call myself not really a fearful person. I'm not afraid of a lot of stuff. Even spiders, like it's not so much fear so much as just in the moment. I'm gonna have my wife kill the thing, but I don't like walk around my life worrying that a spider is gonna appear in my path. Would you say you're the same way? Are you generally fearful or not?
Generally,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm not too
not really.
fearful.
Yeah, okay. So not generally fearful. And then thinking about like my childhood fears, I was thinking about these the other day because as I was determining sort of what were the facets of atheism that I wanted to talk about, the one that kept popping in my mind as the number one first thing I wanted to discuss was fear because my process, and I'll ask you about yours in just a second. My process of getting to this place was filled with, as an adult, the most real terror and fear that I've ever experienced that I can only compare to when I was a kid. And even though it might seem silly now, like the fear of aliens like consumed me. I would think about it like every night going to bed thinking about it and kind of
Wow.
having to sort of double check the shadows and have an escape sort of contingency plan. It's just
Wow.
all consuming fear. So I have to ask you, did fear play a role at all for you as you were moving in through your faith transition, Tom?
Through my faith transition. Wow.
And specifically around God. Like I know that we kind of have to maybe separate out this conversation from the typical sort of post-Mormon faith transition, but kind of just talking about belief in at least the Christian God, the God of Mormonism that we all knew and loved growing up. Was there any fear moving away from that?
Ooh. Um, well, even to backtrack that even a little bit, so pardon me for this, but I had a sincere on like when I felt like I had officially gained a testimony and I really, really believed, I think the fear of Satan or demons or
Oh, okay,
whatever,
yeah, yeah,
that was as real as anything.
yeah.
And where I grew up in southern Utah County, there was actually a big scare of Satan worshipers. I know it was kind of the 80s sort of, it's
The
reminiscent of
Satanic
the,
Panic, yeah.
yeah, right. And because I listened to heavy metal, my parents and some of my ward friends or whatever, they would always counsel us, and we actually had a couple firesides warning us about the evils of music and Satanism and stuff like that. And there was rumors that there was law enforcement that were involved, that they were abducting, kidnapped kids or whatever, and then sacrificing them up the canyon. And
Holy crap. That's some heavy stuff, man.
so that was a legitimate fear. Like I
Yeah.
remember because my friends and I would walk through like a graveyard, and it wasn't actually the actual graveyard that freaked me out. It was the fact that there could be like Satan worshipers in the graveyard at the time that were
Around
doing
any
stuff.
corner. Oh yeah.
So that was a legitimate fear for me for a long, long time. In fact, one of my talks that I gave later on, I actually was focused on the legitimate realism of Satan
Oh
and
yeah.
how if you believe that Satan is real, then hence you follow the logic, and then God is real, and that's that
Yeah.
is how you know.
That's
You
how
know, it's
you know,
like
yeah. And you know
it's
for a
the
fact, obviously, the devil's walking around. I mean, you can hear him clomping around in the attic, and every time you use a Ouija board. So obviously, dude, I know. I think that's. I would. I mean, I've never taken a survey or anything, but I would be willing to wager that legitimate fear of demons, like for every real Christian kid growing up, like that's yeah, I would put that as like the top of the fear list.
and on my mission, there was a family that had a Ouija board that they claimed they couldn't get rid of, and
Like
so
Jumanji.
it just kept coming back, and we had to burn it. and we had like this prayer circle thing around the fire when I was a missionary, and I
Oh
still
yeah.
have pictures. I have pictures of it, and there's a picture of it on fire, and I remember looking at that photo all the time, like, and it never came back. Right, that fire's real, right?
Dude, you're gonna start looking at some family photos, and that Ouija board's gonna be in the background.
I know, right?
Suddenly flipping through. No, no, no. The wedding photos. It's there.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. No, I on my mission, I had one of those sleep paralysis moments. So I had a night when I woke up and I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed and like there was something on my chest sitting on me.
Oh wow.
And I did the whole call upon Jesus and cast him out, and I guess it kind of worked because I'm still here today and I'm alive.
There you go.
But it reminds me of, I mean, this is just a little plug for one of the coolest documentaries I've seen in a long time. It's called The Nightmare. Have you heard of this?
I have not. No.
Oh, it's awesome. It's on Netflix. Basically, this guy went around and he collected real life stories of people that experienced that sleep paralysis, and then he's a professional filmmaker. He took each of their stories and then films like a little short film about each one. So it's kind of like a horror movie mixed with the documentary. It's really cool.
Holy crap! I'll definitely be checking that
Highly
out.
recommended to all the listeners out there, and it might keep you up at night. It's a little creepy. Uh, okay, so fear of the devil was a real thing. So what about fear of losing God, or when you started to move away from believing in God? And would you, I mean, without all the baggage, I mean, would you generally classify yourself, Tom, as an atheist, or at least not a believer in the Christian God?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't know where I categorize myself. I usually call myself agnostic because
Yeah, yeah,
I do subscribe to the something got the ball rolling, and
sure,
then that's it.
gotcha.
Non intervening whatever.
But it's certainly, I mean, would you certainly call it a 180 from where you would have considered
Oh
yourself
yeah.
as a believer?
Like I'm incredibly sympathetic with all forms of atheism. You know, I
Right,
in a lot of ways that's kind of where my mind is anyway, so it doesn't
right.
really matter. Um, yeah, taking those first steps was really scary. I think for me, and this even goes into some of my fears that I have nowadays, the fear of death, like
Yeah.
the big empty void. What is it? Is it the eternal dial tone, like we've said on earlier episodes? I like to think that it's not. I've entertained the thoughts and the notions of some form of reincarnation. Sometimes I talk to my oldest daughter about this, and she sometimes entertains that thought too. Like, what if it's, what if our consciousness is like a form of software and we just get rebooted into something
Right.
else? Um,
Yeah, and I thought about that too, and I found that, and I'll talk a little bit more about my process here in a second, going through like these stages of fear. But like I gravitated towards that for a little bit, but then I started thinking about it, and that was even, or it was just as scary to me because I thought, okay, this family, these relationships, this wife, these people that I know and love, like if reincarnation means I literally don't remember them, like I wouldn't remember my past lives, well then it's the same thing as death to me. It's still super scary.
I know, but it does make me wonder. Like, is there something that carries
Yeah,
through?
yeah.
But there's no way to really know, so I don't know.
Well, yeah, and that I mean that is the I mean that's the penultimate fear I think of humankind, which is funny because as a Christian kid, as a Mormon kid growing up, I was so insulated from even contemplating that question.
Oh yeah,
Like it wasn't even a thing to even consider or even give like half credit to. So in pop culture or wherever you'd hear people joke about being afraid of death or the eventual heat death of the universe, things like that. And it's like, but it's not real, so it's not even worth thinking about. And man, did it hit me like a ton of bricks the first time my mind ever let itself go. Yeah, but what if?
yeah. It's scary as hell because it not only shatters like all that pre-programmed kind of preconceived notions and beliefs that I previously had that brought an intense amount of comfort and
Yeah, oh
solace
yeah,
to your mind. Because I mean, my grandfather passed away when I was pretty young, and anyway, I was really close to him, and I remember thinking it's not a big deal. And
yeah.
funerals weren't that big a deal, and that's what everybody kept saying. Like, hey, he's in a better place. It's fine. When you get older and you pass, you'll be able to see him again. And my grandmother just passed away last month, and that was all everybody said.
Yeah.
She's in a better place. She's finally happy now. She's reunited with all of her family and relatives that have already moved on. And I'm like, that's a good, I mean, it is a very nice thought for sure. And I I know how jarring it is to say, well, that's it for her.
Yeah.
I guess we can go bury what's left.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Like
man.
that is the last time, yeah, we get to ever see grandma. Oh, it's so hard. And in fact, speaking about uh not thinking it's a big deal, it's funny because part of the podcast itself, part of the reasons for doing it is that not only as a Christian and as a believer in God did I 100% find myself constantly just dismissing even the notion and not giving any credit or respect or anything to thinking sort of through the possibility of oblivion. But even on the atheist side of things, I would hear like people just so dismissively or cavalierly, that I realize now is like real acceptance and more power to them. But when I would hear somebody go like, yeah, just when you die, you die. That's it. You're done. No big deal. Just like anything
Yeah,
else, just like a tree, just like the stars, you're just done. And it's like, man, but I'm not like a tree or the stars. Like I'm me.
right,
Like I
right.
got some real good stuff going on here. Like, uh, and man, when I had my and I'll probably share throughout these different episodes different pieces of sort of my story that led me here, but well before I ever started disbelieving in Mormonism, I had some pretty powerful experiences that caused me to really question the existence of God. And really it came from, I mean, the easiest way to sum it up was sincerely, and in my most desperate moment when I was having these little weird doubts but being as outwardly active as I could be, finally deciding like, no, this is stupid. I'm gonna get down. I'm gonna pray, and God Himself is gonna give me the answer that I know is coming because He's always answered me before. So, man, it was just that prayer that even though in the back of my head I'm like, this is stupid. You shouldn't pray and ask God if He's real because you know the answer and you're just being an ungrateful servant or whatever. It's like, no, I'm gonna do this, and goddamn, wouldn't you know it, Tom? Like all night long, sat there listening and waiting for an answer, and there's just nothing. And that's when the deepest fear that I've ever experienced hit me like a ton of bricks. Because in the back of my head, I had been flirting with this idea, but always
Wow.
with that comfort of like, yeah, I mean, maybe it's not quite what we understand, but at least I have these things that I know. I know that and it would be church testimony sort of things, and it would be experiences I maybe had as a kid that seemed to reaffirm like a belief in God. But man, I had this one experience that was so real, and I had to think to myself, well, if God is real, He would have to know the types of things that would impact me in a significant way, and He would have to know that this is impacting me in a significant enough way to cause me to lose belief in Him. So He either wants me to do this or believe this way, or He just isn't there. And honestly, I think the second one was even more comforting than the first of those two options.
Yeah, and I actually understand why you'd feel that way. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I had one of those moments where I was praying and praying, praying. It was like one of those where I need the answer to this prayer, right? It's like, God, you hardly acknowledged my existence to this point. I need something right here, right
Like
now.
this is it. Yeah.
And I prayed and prayed and prayed. And like you said, I got nothing. Even in hindsight, I'm looking back, I got nothing. But the acknowledgement or even the acceptance of that I got nothing, it was just too painful to acknowledge. And
Yeah.
so I
Oh yeah.
thought, so I'm doing a lot of inner work. I'm looking at my heart like, was that something? Wait, did I feel something? Did I hear? Was that wasn't a bird, right? That was something,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because acknowledging that I just got the dial tone,
Yeah. Oh,
busy
I know.
signal or whatever. It's just like, um, that's just it was an unacceptable answer to accept. You can't say he's either one ignoring you or he's not there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, and
bad.
that's what led to. So I mean, having this experience, and then just like you thinking, okay, like I don't think I can accept it wholesale. It's not like I can just throw all this away, but it left such an impact that now, and when I say this sort of pervasive fear, like the aliens that was there every night, it was like now I was afraid to go to sleep. I was afraid when I wake up in the morning, I would find myself thinking, do I still believe in God? Do I not? Like, am I questioning this thing? And
Wow.
and every morning it'd be like, shoot, it didn't go away. Because I mean, maybe this is part of living maybe a charmed life where I've had bad things happen, but for me, like most of my worst experiences happened in dreams, and so you'd wake up and be like, "Oh, thank goodness, I still have my legs. Oh, thank goodness, I have my family." And I
Of
guess this was
course.
one of those things that I was hoping I would just wake up from, be like, "Oh, it was just a dream that I lost my faith. No big deal." and then you'd find yourself in public. I'd get these little panic attacks where I'd suddenly just start thinking like, oh, if death is the end, then that means that's the end of me. Like, oh, that's the end of me loving my children. That's the end of me like knowing when the next Avengers movie is coming out. That's the end of everything. And then I start thinking, and know where you turn is their comfort, because you got the believers who can't understand, legitimately can't understand. And then any sort of atheist source I would look at, again, there'd be this sort of cavalier, almost like looking at you like, duh, buddy, like just get used to it. That's just how it is. And it's like, man, am I the only one freaking out about this thing? And then you're afraid that you're going crazy.
Yeah. And how do you get used to that idea? I don't know. And even thinking about, like you said, not loving your kids or your spouse or those that you love, and
Oh yeah.
and then leaving that emptiness after you're gone for them. Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, and then you start going down these like real crazy paths. I started thinking, and I'm sure nothing that I've thought of hasn't been thought of a million times by greater philosophers than I, but it seemed unique at the time to me. I was like, okay, if I die, and that's really the end, and it's the end of my conscious awareness of the universe, then that sort of means that, like, if I'm not consciously aware of what's going on, then in 100 years I'm not going to be consciously aware of what's going on, and 100 years of not being conscious is the same as 1,000, and eventually it's going to be 6 billion years, and the sun's going to blow up, and literally all of us are going to be gone. So when I die, everybody dies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's some pretty big leaps there, but yeah, I get where you're going.
So I would call that super spooky on the scale.
Super spook, yes.
Just thinking about, not only do I die, but my family dies. Like, everybody dies, and then realizing the 180 shift for me was that if I was to sum up what being a Mormon gave me, it was, at the time, it was that I was an exception to almost every rule. Like, there was always an out. There was there's no pain, or there was no real bad consequence that you didn't have a way to overcome, whether it was like now or in the eternities. And suddenly, when I'm starting to realize that, oh, everybody dies. Wait, that means I die. That means this whole time I've been sitting here thinking that there was going to be, because by the way, I didn't even think I was actually going to die. I truly believed I was going to be alive by the time Christ came back, because I was going to be one of those twinkles. Right?
Oh, I thought that too.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to have to experience any of this craziness. Like, he's going to come down, I'm going to look down, I'm going to have abs all of a sudden. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Right.
Like the swirly sparkles of Cinderella's dress, and suddenly it's just like, oh, gained 2 inches on my dick. It's awesome.
That's 2 more than I had.
That's right. That literally doubles the size. It's amazing. No, I was so divorced from the idea of death that I literally, growing up, believed I wouldn't die. And so then to suddenly be faced with the reality of death and your own death and the permanence of it, and I'll just say I was completely unprepared to deal with that, and I frankly dealt with it poorly for probably 3 or something years.
Oh, wow. I'll even put a little twist on this. I actually was looking forward to death when I was like deep in my believing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because the idea of the afterlife actually was somewhat intoxicating. Like, hey, you get to, well, I guess the judgment bar didn't seem that great, especially, you having to watch
but it's details.
The movie screen, like, oh shit, I guess I did do that. But and what about the whole forgiveness thing? Okay, you'll let me go. But when I was on my mission, and this is a funny little story. So when I was on my mission, I actually thought a lot about the potential of me dying on my mission.
Like that's the time to do it, right?
Oh yeah, because you get that, the equivalent of the golden ticket in the Willy Wonka thing.
You get the tour, yeah.
Yeah, you get the exclusive VIP treatment because you don't even have to go to the judgment bar. Like, oh, you died in your mission? Come on through. Move the velvet rope. And I actually was totally thrilled with that idea. In fact, I wrote it in my journal a few times. Like, if everything works out, great, I'll die out here and I'll have to go through the rest of my quote life, and that'd be great. And I ended up getting in an accident. We rolled our car.
You rolled your car on your mission?
Yeah, on my mission. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Um, in hindsight, it was just an idiotic, stupid thing. We were on a dirt road. We were trying to find this address or something like that, and I was going a little too fast, and there was a blind turn, and it was dark, and yeah, and I spun out, overcorrected, and roll.
Wow.
Yeah, and we landed back up on the wheels, and it was the closest thing to a modern day miracle that I'd experienced.
Yeah, yeah.
And neither one of us got terribly injured. We ended up walking to a house, and they saved us or whatever. And I remember,
Were you late to your appointment?
yeah, we missed the appointment. Yeah,
Did you get back into your apartment on time?
no, we were way late. But I remember thinking, I was super disappointed and discouraged that I didn't die.
Oh, like that was you were so close, Tom.
I know
One more roll and you would have been fine.
and I was talking to my wife about this a while ago. I just said, that whole experience. I should have been just so grateful that I survived and everything worked out great.
Right, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
I walked away with, scratches and bruises, and that's it. But instead, I was genuinely bummed. Like, why did the car have to land back on its wheels? If it would have just landed upside down, it could have crushed me.
Wow.
Isn't
Well,
that messed up?
Well, now thinking about it, does it give you that little sort of like the sort of death jitters where you're like, oh man, that was close?
Oh yeah, especially when I see my kids. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
y'all wouldn't have existed.
Yeah, that's right. Oh man, yeah, you start taking it forward to like all the things that could have happened and will happen eventually when we do die. But
Right.
that's yeah, I mean that illustrates perfectly, Tom. I think. Hey, listeners, men, women, brothers, sisters, whoever, if you're out there and you're like feeling scared, like if atheism scares you and not just the word, because the word can be scary, but that thought that like what it means to actually not believe in God, like you're not alone. It is an incredibly heavy, scary thing that now, as I start to look out, instead of kind of ignoring those little pop culture references, I start to catch these little code words, and it's like, oh, that dude's terrified of death just like me. Like,
Mhm.
and so is that guy, and so is that guy, and that lady. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it takes the fear away, but I will say that after several years of truly like trying to bottle it down, like trying to tamp it deep inside of me and never talk about it, and it's almost like if you speak its name, you give it power. It's like freaking Voldemort. I found it's exactly the opposite is true, and actually, I know I'll probably say this a million times throughout this podcast, but one of the reasons for the podcast is to get ourselves away from being afraid of these like labels, afraid of saying things like there is no God or there is no life after death or the word atheist, because I have found that as I embrace it and as I say it, like somehow, some way, I'm not afraid of it anymore. And here's somebody
Is
that literally a year ago, like I knew that tonight I would have gone to sleep and I would have had to deal with another bout of fear and anxiety around this thing, and I've slept like a baby for like the last year. Like I'm just not afraid of this thing anymore. At least
so you
not as often.
so you're saying that if you practice saying it, you'll eventually believe it, kind of like the Boyd K. Packer saying that if you continue to bear your testimony, you'll eventually get one.
That's exactly right. I actually
Okay.
took that advice from Boyd K. Packer exactly, yeah.
Okay.
That if you look in a mirror and you say atheist 3 times, one will appear behind you.
Yeah. And then he's gonna say, "Guess what? When you die, that's it.
It'll be
Sucks,
like, hey,
man.
you're gonna
But
finish
just
that
deal
slice
with
of pizza? Huh? No.
it." Yeah, but
You'd be like,
even
hey, can I
adding
borrow your
another,
car?
yeah, adding another layer to that. One of the other things that really sucks about having to accept this inevitable label, like you say, try telling a kid.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
because
Oh man, yeah.
we just talked about how comforting and wonderful it is by saying, when your kid comes up to you and says, "Hey, what happened to grandma? Where she died, now what?" And instead of saying, "Oh, she's in heaven," or whatever, you have to give that really really ugly terrible answer that no kid is
Yeah.
prepared to listen to, like,
Yeah.
grandma's gone, the 4-letter word gone. That's
Yeah.
it. And
Oh, it's so
it's
hard.
horrible.
It's like
I've had to do that with my 2 older kids, and I remember thinking what I wouldn't give to be a believer in something right now, so I could
oh, tell me
not
about it. Yeah.
give that burden to my kids.
Yeah, I mean that's where I mean when the rubber starts to hit the road, I mean those I mean I think that's whether or not it's fear or just the that you're recognizing what you've lost. I mean they're both sort of equal in my mind sort of emotions, and those moments when you're having to talk to your kids, or those moments when you know, I'll see believers and like I'm not embarrassed to admit that like I'm jealous of people that can believe, that have that easy belief, and
Yeah.
just thinking
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's not just the permanence of death. It's like, no, I mean, I know, I guess as well as I knew my believing testimony that I'm not going to get this thing back. You know, like it's kind of gone, and and unfortunately, you there's way too much evidence to support it. So every day I look around or I hear the news, and it's like, oh, not only are there spiders and rats and terrorists and those little hairless cats always showing up, but it's like, yeah, there's another thing that yeah, it makes me feel pretty sure I'm right in terms of this belief that there
Mhm.
is nothing out there. But
Yeah.
oh, I know talking to your kids about it is super hard too. But the question I have is, uh, in talking to your kids about it, how do they seem to react poorly, or do they seem to be like how do they react to it?
That's a great question.
Have you talked to them
Poorly.
about it?
Yeah, I've talked to two of my, well, no, I've talked to all three of my kids about it. I don't know if I would say poorly. It's been really, really sad and really, really scary. Like my youngest, who's 7, she was asking me about this a few months ago, and she's like, "So what's going to happen?" And then she of course still goes to primary, and so she's getting one
Sure,
message,
sure.
and then I'm telling the other message, and I'm going to lose that battle every single time when it comes to death.
Oh yeah.
And she's like, "So, Dad, you think that when we're dead, we're dead?" And I'm like, "Well, that's kind of the way I'm leaning. I can't say that for sure. I don't think anyone knows what happens. Just those that have died really know." And she's like, "So when you die, that's it? Is that what you're saying?"
Oh no,
And,
she took it to that next level.
and then yeah, because where she's like, "So when you die, Dad, or if I die, then that's the end for us as a."
Yeah.
And I was like, anyway, so is there a book you guys want to read together? Yeah, I don't know how to answer that because
Can
it's
we go get some
horrible.
ice cream or something? Because goddamn,
I
you
don't know
guys
if
have
you
earned
guys,
it.
we're not dead yet. How about that? So that's
That's,
all I
I
got.
mean, that's about all we know.
That's all I can say is that, hey, guess what?
Yeah.
You're not dead. I'm not dead. Let's celebrate what we have right here, right now, and let's just continue to work on living as long as we possibly can. How about that?
Yeah. Man, yeah, I remember I was trying to talk to my daughter about it a little bit, and it was interesting. The conversation went in the direction of, um, it was like answers. It was like, because we were talking about it, and she said, "Oh, I don't like that," and it kind of led to saying like, well, if we don't like something, does that necessarily mean that it's not true, right? And I think we had a
Yeah.
pretty good object lesson because I think that she had gotten in trouble for something that she didn't listen when we'd given the answer, and she ended up getting hurt or something like that, and it led to this really interesting discussion. Even and I don't even know if she'll remember it, but in my mind it sort of stuck where it was this. I was sort of admitting to myself that part of being a non-believer is this sort of understanding that answers run the spectrum, but some answers are beneficial to you. Some answers are definitely not, and there are some things that literally don't have answers, and that was very an un-Mormon-like thing of me to think about because supposedly there are answers to everything,
Hmm.
and that was a hard conversation. Just being like, oh, because I'm your dad and I'm supposed to have all these answers, and I don't have an answer to some of these things you're asking. I don't
Right.
think anybody does, but just admitting that like no amount of research is going to get me or prayer or anything is going to get me to a place of being able to answer definitively some of these hard questions, and that's scary. Like
Yeah.
not having the answer to something, that's scary.
It's terribly scary, and it makes you feel, I don't know, it brings my kind of my self-esteem down because I'm supposed to be a parent. I'm supposed to be telling them like I've got the answers. I know why the sky
Right.
is blue or whatever, and I don't have answers. Like if they say, is there life on other planets? Oh, we haven't found any yet. Maybe,
Yeah,
but
maybe.
I don't know. Maybe we will find some. And then my oldest daughter, she likes she plays the idea of the possibility that humankind will colonize other planets in the future. And That's entirely possible, depending on what we can do as mankind and
That's
whatever. I
no,
don't know.
that's entirely right. That actually reminds me of one of my weirder sort of thought experiments to try and talk myself out of being scared of death. It was I call it the future God theory, and it was like I'm like, hey, humans, we keep evolving, we keep getting more technically advanced, and there might not be a God right now, but if one day some dude ends up, this sounds pretty familiar, if a man somehow becomes God at one point, and he turns around, he's like, hey, it'd be a cool idea. Let's like let's generate and then save the souls of all these people who came before us. That'd be pretty cool. Download into an internal hard drive, and that's just us. We're just inside of a giant computer that future God came
Right.
up with. I don't know where I was going with that, but basically we play these pretty strange games, I think, to sort of deal with these latent fears of death and the unknown. Um, but I do know that the time period that I spent being afraid, I do know that it was unhealthy for me. Like I know there were some good things that came from it, but if part of this podcast is trying to figure out how to not be an asshole about certain things, I think I was a pretty big asshole because I was afraid of a lot of stuff, and I don't think I
Right.
dealt well with certain conversation paths. And on one hand, kind of like I was mentioning before, like the smugness of both believers who were just like, I know, and they'd bear their testimony, and I'd be in church and they'd be talking about how wonderful it was that God did something for him. I'm just thinking like, "Ah, you asshole, like he didn't do anything for me. Um, versus again, I hear like I'd look, and I actually would try watching videos of like Dawkins and some of these other guys that are so comfortable in their belief that it absolutely there's a smugness there of just like, yep, haha, there's nothing. It sucks. We're all
Right.
gonna die. It sucks. And I'm like, no, neither of these things are good. And then I would overreact and trying to hide it. It left a lot of stuff unspoken between my wife and I because I was so afraid, fear on top of fear, of letting her know these things that I was feeling. So that was unhealthy. Do you and your wife
Sure.
ever talk about this stuff?
Occasionally, and
I mean, I
yeah,
know you
it's
guys come from different points of view, but
well when she starts to talk about it, and then when I start to openly talk about where my mind is and what I've been entertaining, especially with like death and all that kind of stuff. I know that some of the things that I think about and I believe now, I guess believe is the right word. Um, it scares her because I'm pretty
sure.
direct about it, and usually I have to give that caveat like, hey, listen, I'm not cool with the idea either. It's
Yeah, I'm not happy
I,
about this.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like, hey, this isn't something that I chose. I mean, if I could choose to, take that Christian belief of, we're all going to go to heaven and play harps or whatever, that's great. I would take that in a heartbeat. But the thing is if once I start going down that logic loophole of letting evidence kind of construct the way I see the world, that's kind
sure.
of where you end up, and it's not really my fault at all. And it's even going back to one of the things that I actually really work hard at taking comfort in when you have to tell your kids about some of the hard truths of the world. I like the idea that my kids will grow up and say, well, my dad was actually telling me how it is, and
Right.
they're not gonna have to go through that phase of disillusionment that I went through. Like, what
Right.
the fuck did they tell me about this? And then I have to like,
Yeah.
you know, take the scrub brush to my brain and say, what was all this nonsense doing in here? And then try to rebuild it.
Yeah.
At least my kids will know that I'm working really hard at following where the evidence takes us. And that's the most important thing because I'm very, determined to follow where the evidence goes and what is real as to what is
Yeah.
not.
Well, I think that's a really cool point, Tom, that I hadn't even thought about until just right this moment. We're talking about talking to our kids, and you're almost like putting in the bank, you're sort of future proofing your kids' response to this realization, and it's coming.
Sure. Yeah.
And I hadn't really ever thought about it before, but like I guess it makes sense to me to think that maybe one of the motivations or one of the reasons to, I think, tackle or dive head on to your fear, because I know it's different for everybody, and I don't want to say that the process of just if you're scared of spiders, putting a whole bunch of spiders down your pants, like diving into your fear isn't always the way to go. But I think existential fear, there's kind of no other way to deal with it other than dive into it and lean into it and start trying to talk about it, writing about it, like admitting it, expressing it. And it's scary, and it's scary to talk about your fear, but it's also it's painful, and there's all kinds of inhibitions, I think, both built in and, I don't know, maybe even primarily just as human beings, as animals, we don't want to die, so trying to like explore that with our minds is tough. But maybe what I'm getting at is that if the extra motivation is there, that the sooner you get to a healthy place, the sooner you can start laying the groundwork and supporting other people that are, their time is coming when they're going to be experiencing this. Like, I know right now that my daughter is not going to have to go through a period of years and years of being terrified to talk about the thing that's scaring her the most, because she'll see me here. Like, she'll know. Yeah. Unless I'm dead and then I'm gone forever.
Yeah, there's always
but
that.
If I'm here, then she will be able to know that there's a source that she can turn to. And yeah, I hadn't really thought about that before, but that, I don't know, that makes me feel like, okay, I could probably work my way through some more of this, and at least being able to give the comfort. I love what you said also earlier, where, when you're talking to somebody who's not coming from the same perspective of you, not just being the bigger person, but also being honest enough to say, yeah, I'm not thrilled with this. It does terrify me, Yeah. And I'm not saying these things to be a dick, and I'm not saying these things to even change your mind, but for me, it is not a casual thing to have lost my belief. It is not it's a big deal. Yeah. It's not like a take it or leave it sort of situation, and to have to deal with it, I'm more than willing, when I'm talking to somebody else, to say, I wish so bad this was not how I felt.
Yeah,
but
right.
I do, and I need to start working through that, because it's unhealthy for me to deny that part of me.
And I hope this works out in the long run.
I hope it works out.
That it's a beneficial thing, for at least for me, when I talk to my kids about, I'm scared. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen to us after we die or whatever. And then when my youngest, she's genuinely afraid of that idea, and I'm allowing her space to entertain it, and she realizes that that's where I'm at. At least at the moment, I can say, yeah, see, your dad is scared too, so it's fine. That scary feeling you have, that's the same feeling I have. It's the same feeling we all have when we actually accept that there might not be something after. It's scary, but hey, let's take solace in each other right here, right now, and let's try to work through it together. I don't know, but even going back to my fear, or when I was scared of heights, and how I eventually overcame it, is I don't say this to brag, I promise, but I've worked really, really hard at becoming more and more self-aware in my later years. And when I started to overcome my fear of heights, I started to realize that there was a form of irrationality to that fear. Like, really, if I'm in a high roller coaster, what am I scared of? I mean, I'm in a fairly stable, secure roller coaster, and statistically, there hasn't been a lot of deaths and accidents. So, I'm
right.
I know it's like a really heady thing to do. Like, really, you got those few seconds to think of all that shit, and then you're not scared? Okay, great. But for me, once I started thinking about that, it actually got me to where I could walk to the edge of a cliff and say, as long as I still have my wits about me and I have control of my body, I'll be fine. Or if I'm in a roller coaster, and then I can think, okay, there's not, the probability of me getting killed is pretty low. It's not zero, but it's still low. Right. So it makes me feel a little bit better. And I think that's kind of where I just live my life now. I still do things that are somewhat risky. I'm not sure that I'm going to do skydiving. I would love to do it at some point. At least,
me too, yeah.
Have you done that, Sage? Have you done skydiving?
No, I haven't, but it's always been a thing that I've wanted to do. Skydiving and the bungee jump.
Yeah, sure.
But I do start thinking of it differently now. It is like, oh, but that 1% chance.
I know.
The parachute.
You're putting even the smallest of risk on your life. It's scary, but that's how we get the adrenaline rush, I guess. I do want to do it, but my wife is super scared, and I'd like to be able to do it with her. But
yeah.
Time will tell.
No, I think there's huge value into maybe the most simple of anti-fear techniques. And I'm thinking back to when you're a kid and there's like you think there's a monster under your bed, and there's two techniques, one of which I don't got much ammo for, but one of them was, singing a primary song, right?
Right? Yeah, right.
Finding something sort of comforting that you can take your mind off it. I mean, that actually works, and whether or not it's a primary song or it's just getting lost in, you know, Game of Thrones or something, that's, different strokes for different folks. But the other thing too is also just repeating to yourself, monsters aren't real, monsters aren't real, monsters aren't real. And I think having that presence of mind of trying to at least analyze the situation, I think that works for death too, because part of me that sort of helped, even though it doesn't immediately dissipate the fear. I've just gotten a little better at going to this place each time it starts to creep up, is saying, okay, if this is the end, then I don't have to fear it, because A, it's happened to everybody, and B, I'm not going to really know. Like, it's not going to be like me trapped in a box, although it might be. We don't know what comes after this life.
Right.
It might be trapped in a box and you're just looking out like a two-way mirror, and your family can't hear you, and you're just infinitely screaming for them, which sounds horrible. I'm afraid of that.
Jeez.
But
Okay, I won't be
a
sleeping
new thing
tonight.
to be
Thanks, Sage.
scared of.
Right.
But if it is the assumed just pull the plug and it's the static, then I don't have anything to fear, because I'm not going to know it. I'm not going to experience it, and it's sad. And I feel sadness for my children and family that they would go through that as well. But I don't know. Maybe there's something to just sort of talking it through and saying like, okay, at least I don't have to be panic attacking over here. I can at least be trying to rationally talk through what it even actually means to die, and possibly these things that we can do to better appreciate life. I don't know.
Exactly. And one of the things that actually is somewhat relieved some of the panic and stress over death for myself is it was a book I read or a lecture, I can't remember, where they talked about when you're sedated to going in for surgery. And then they use that as an analogy, like, well, what do you remember when you were sedated? And, well, nothing. More times than not, you're breathing. They're like, okay, count backwards from 100, and you make it to 95 if you're lucky. And then you wake up, you're drugged,
Yeah.
you're kind of putting all the pieces back together. You're like, where am I? What's my name again? What's going on? And you're heavily sedated still, at least you're medicated anyways. But I mean, I don't know anybody that can remember what happened, or because the brain is in that weird state, right? I don't remember what it's called. Anyway,
Although if you could remember, that gives me yet another thing to be terrified of. Being aware during surgery. That's
yeah, I'm
okay,
trying
I'm
trying to give people peace of mind, and you're reminded, like, well, there's another thing that'll keep you up at night. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sage. No, but when I think about that, because I've gone through several surgeries, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't remember anything. Like, it was a complete, it was like nothing. And that's what my memory tells me. So I wake up and I'm like, okay, so that, essentially went through a time machine for all I know. And then I woke up, 4 hours later or whatever. So that doesn't sound so bad. If it's just a full on unplug, your brain turns off, you don't know anything, that doesn't sound too bad. But even one of the discussions that we had on an earlier episode, the thing that really bothers me about that, here's another caveat, why that's not always good, is because
there's so much comfort here tonight.
Yeah, right. Because all the assholes and really evil people in the world, like Hitler, they kind of get off scot-free. Once they die,
true,
they get the same reward that you and I get.
See, that's one of the things that made it hard for me to actually keep sort of believing in afterlife and that kind of thing, because it's so perfect. It's like, all right, I'm going to get to live a cool life, and all the people that suck, they're going to have like crappy eternities, and I'm going to get a mansion, and I can fly, and laser beam nipples, and like all the stuff that, you're going to get. That was just me trying to figure out why guys had nipples. It had to be something in the resurrection.
I think
right?
that's
So
a very
probably laser
practical
beams.
use. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, just like cutting down trees and stuff, harvesting, battles. That's how the angels fight. I don't know if you knew that.
Well, and to look cool too. Yeah.
Super, super cool as hell. I'm gonna have green ones. Get to pick the color.
I'm gonna have hot pink, dude. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Tom, we're reaching the end of our hour here, so I have a little final segment, and I'm gonna call this thing
Get it off our chest.
It's not very catchy, but maybe I'll add some echo effects or something like that to it. Okay, you listeners, you're gonna witness a therapy session right here, right now. This is gonna be as fast as you can, one right after the other. You go and then I go, and you go and I go, and until we don't got no more. Top of your head, stuff that as an adult you're legitimately afraid of right now. I'm gonna start with a real big one. I'm afraid of cancer.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Can I steal that one too? I would say
Sure.
any sort of terminal disease, Alzheimer's. That
Ooh, yeah,
scares me.
scary.
But with one caveat, like, would be kind of nice to kind of get that reboot. You don't have to remember a lot of crazy bad shit in your life. So I don't
That's
know,
true. You
maybe.
just gotta go back and remember your 20s or whatever.
Or
It's
yeah, whatever.
pretty good. I'm scared of one of my children getting kidnapped.
Uh, yeah. Well, now you're dipping in the ultimate extremes. Any loved one getting kidnapped, raped, or killed.
Ooh, yeah.
I
Ugh,
don't even know how I'd
scary.
handle it. I've had the the fantasies like Sam Jackson in A Time to Kill, where
Right.
he hangs out in the closet, and then the guys are going into the courtroom. He's like, I'm not going to let these guys even face justice. I'm just going to kill them dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes
Ugh.
I've wondered if something terrible like that happened to one of my kids, would I actually do that? I just hope and pray. Well, hope and pray. There you go. I just really, I just really hope that I would never be in that situation because I really, honestly don't know how I'd handle it. I hope that I wouldn't do that, but yeah.
So crazy, yeah. I'm afraid of being irrelevant at some point, like nobody caring.
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, yeah, I'm afraid of that I would disappoint those that I love somehow, some way.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. I'm afraid not so much of my own death at this point, but I'm afraid that if I died right now, my kids just really wouldn't remember me.
Yeah, that's a good one.
When it came right
Um,
down to it, when they're adults, they wouldn't remember me.
I'm afraid of literally being tortured for a long period of time.
Shoot, yeah, me too.
Yeah, that doesn't sound
Yeah,
fun.
that one sounds bad. Yeah, I'm afraid of drowning. That sounds terrible. That's not the way I want to die.
Oh, now we're going to talk about ways to die?
I guess so. Ugh.
Uh, I would choose to be blown up if I could choose the way to die. That sounds pretty instantaneous.
Oh, so
Um,
that's pretty good. My ultimate way to die was always like I like doing pranks and stuff, and I always thought that like what I would do is I'd work my way up to being like president of the United States of America. I'd call this big press conference. I'd be like, guys, I have a huge announcement. Are you ready? And I would just make sure they had like one of these like little sort of like bombs on like the back of my head. And I'd just be like,
yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, America, all I want to say is boop, and just like have it rigged so it basically just like pop my head off, just like doo, just like do a little few flips. That's all. That's my dream way of going.
Okay, well then I'm afraid of being decapitated, and then your head still being alive for like 3 or 4 seconds as you look into like the basket. If you're in the guillotine, like look into the
Yeah,
basket. Holy shit! I'm still alive. I can still hear and see things. This sucks.
yeah. They did some research. Oh yeah, they did some research about that. You actually you get about 2 or 3 seconds. Yeah, I'm afraid of paralysis. Oh, that'd be terrible.
Oh yeah,
Being
that
like
would
totally
suck.
paralyzed, but like the guy that can only talk with like his eyes blinking, or Stephen Hawking. At least he gets a cool computer voice.
And handicap parking, right? Yeah. Oh man.
All right, here's
Uh,
a big one. Here's are you afraid at all that you're wrong right now about there not being a god?
that's a great one. Not as much as I used to be. For the first few years of my disaffection, I kind of was holding to that rod of like, I don't know, man, I'm gonna waffle it for a while because I'm not sure which
Yeah,
way. Even though the evidence was like, come on, man, come on, man, come on, man. Um, no,
like
I don't.
somehow you're pulling the wool over God's eyes. Just be like, oh man, I was just playing a joke on you.
I
I was
there's
just kidding. That whole "you're not real" thing. That was stupid. That was dumb. That wasn't me.
JK.
April Fools.
No, in full transparency, I actually when I because sometimes I'll still go back to church, and I'll sit back and I kind of play this like science experiment in my mind. I'm like, all right, let's see if I could actually plug back into this. I want to see how it can actually sway me and try to look at it as objective as I possibly can, and without fail. Each and every time I've done that experiment internally, it's come out. I made the right call, man. Yeah, this
Come out ahead.
is.
Yep.
It's like the evidence is so overwhelming that it's like I really don't even have a few seconds to hesitate. It's like, yeah, I made the right call. Oof.
Yep. Phew. But then again, there's also that little piece like, and if you do come down, just kidding, God, just kidding. I got your back. You're waving to the camera up in the sky.
Oh man.
Well, Tom, we just talked about some pretty scary stuff, but how are you feeling scared right now?
Yeah, it's kind of late. I'm supposed to try to sleep tonight. I don't know if that'll happen. Are you going to be able to sleep tonight, Sage? Are you going to be worried about aliens?
I'm gonna sleep like a baby, man. I'm gonna sleep like a baby. Felt really good talking to you, Tom. Thanks for running through all of this scary stuff.
You too, Sage. I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Cool. All right, Tom. Well, we'll talk to you later. And so ends the first episode of the New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. So what did we learn today? Well, first, we learned that fear is totally normal. Losing your faith in God can be one of the scariest experiences in a once believing person's life. Frankly, if fear of death, fear of the unknown, fear of what happens after we die, or just the fear that there is no God is keeping you up at night, know that you're not alone, and that you are part of, frankly, millions and millions of people in this world that fear the exact same thing. Second, we learned that we really just have to accept that there are scary things in this world. There are some things that we honestly can't control. Bad things happen to good people. Some things that are broken can never be repaired. Some things can be lost permanently. And while it's sad, understanding that being afraid of things that we just can't control isn't healthy. It's normal, but it isn't productive. So how do we get over that fear? Well, today we also learned that talking through our fear can be a great help. Finding someone you love or someone that fears the same things you do and having a dialogue, admitting that you don't know what happens after you die, or admitting that you're afraid of the possibilities of there being no God can be very therapeutic. Talking through your fears is one of the best ways to move past them, these fears that you might be feeling every single day. Final thing that we learned is this responsibility we have as new atheists to move past the fear stage of our new life's journey, so that future generations, those that depend on us, those that will eventually seek us out for advice or comfort, can see our lives as a model of how to move past unproductive fear and move into a more healthy respect for the things that we can't control, the things that we don't understand, the things that we'll honestly never know. And by being a helpful person and by being a mentor in situations like that, well, that's one of the best ways to not be an asshole. I hope you enjoyed listening to the New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. And until next time, toodaloo, bitches.